would your dad say if you arrived at his house in a new Rolls Royce? Said, Dad, look at my new car. What would be your dad's reaction? Can you imagine it? Now, let me point something out here. Each one of you imagined a very different dad with a very different reaction. But what just happened was what I call a one-to-one communication. In other words, even though we've got a group here, I talked to you and it was your dad and your dad's response, etc. Does that make sense? Now, I'd like you to breathe in. Now I'd like you to resist what I'm going to tell you to do next. Breathe in. Can't resist me forever, can you? I say, you have to do what I'm asking you to do, even if you're drunk and don't want to. I watched a guy one night who was on television, he was a preacher, on television. And he looked in the camera and he said, breathe in. And he just stopped. And I happened to be in a bar, drinking a Coke, just watching what was happening in this bar. And I looked around and I thought, I recognized the preacher, and I thought I had a lot of time in the airport, and so I thought, I'm going to go in and watch. This was years ago. They wouldn't have preachers in a bar today. But I thought, wonder what people in the bar think of watching this guy on TV. And I don't drink at that time, so I was just sitting there with my Diet Coke or whatever, just watching people. Watch the evangelist, the televangelist, right? So I looked in the camera, he says, breathe in. He steps back. And I realized that the drunkest person in the bar couldn't resist him forever, just like you couldn't resist me forever, right? Sooner or later, they had to breathe in. And after he realized that he'd waited long enough and they had to breathe in, or they were getting rather exhausted with it, he looked at the camera and he said, God is as close to you as the breath you just took in your lungs. That's one-to-one communication. Every person watching actually did what he said, but had a different set of lungs and had a different experience breathing. But it was one-to-one, even though it was 1 million people watching. Now, another situation. Let's say, for example, we get 10,000 people in the audience here today. And I put up a picture of a lady who is emaciated and dying with a baby. And I say to you, 80,000 people are dying every day of starvation in the world or whatever. And you have one reaction to that, right? You think, well, that's too bad. Sorry about that. I'll have to give more next time at church or something. Let's change the headline just a little bit. What if I said, if this were your mother, how would you want Christians in the world to respond to her? And if you can literally imagine your mother being in that state, how would you want Christians to respond to her? Every one of you are imagining a different mother. But you're all addressing the question of how would you want that to happen? It's like it's almost like I'm talking to you one-to-one. There may be 10,000 people in the audience, but it's like I'm talking to you and your mother. And what I'm talking about is you. That's what I call one-to-one communication to the mass. Does that make sense to you, those three things? You know how your dad would operate with a Rolls Royce. You know how you'd want your mother treated. You would know, you breathed in. I say, that is how you communicate with a mass audience. You don't tell them, you basically have them experience something, and then once they've experienced it, you interpret what principles that you want them to know in relationship to that. But you don't just stand up and start teaching principles. Say, you ought to do this, not talking at them, but with one-to-one, you can start talking with them. You can sort of realize what's happening in their dad or their mom or their whatever, and then teach the principles that you want to teach in relationship to their family, not just talk at them. Does that make sense to you? I need to see your heads here. Yes? No? Okay. Now, so let me teach you the principles of how to do it then. Speaking with an audience of any size, you breathe in, live audience, media, one-to-one. Your first 3 sentences betray your agenda. Listen to this. Let me give you a little secret. Every speaker you ever hear for the rest of your life, you can tell in the first 3 sentences whether they're on your agenda or their own. First 3 sentences, you can tell it every time. If they start out, I'm so glad to be here tonight, they're on their agenda. If they start out, you never know what kind of problem I had getting here. The train didn't work, and the car didn't work, and this. But I'm sure, it's like we finally made it. It's like it's their agenda. It's like if they start out with I, if they start with I, me, mine, they are on their agenda, and they will stay on their agenda the rest of the night. If they start out with you, what is the greatest stress you've got right now in your life? Think about it, friend. What's the greatest stress you've got for right now in your life? Let me teach you some of the principles as to how to deal with that. Do you feel the difference in it? If the first 3 sentences are really you-centered, they're there to help you. If the first 3 sentences are about I, me, mine, they're there to impress you. You can do it the rest of your life, every speaker you ever hear. And when you are the speaker, if you listen to your last 3 tapes, listen to the first 3 sentences, and you can betray your own agenda. You can find out what your own agenda was and ask if it wasn't true. You'll find it is. By the way, just as one thought, when you're trying to talk with people, not at them, I don't know where they taught it, in seminary or what, but a lot of pastors never look at you. They teach and preach like this. They actually, and they look at a seat maybe or something, but they never look at you. You'll never see them make eye contact. We've got a pastor at the church we attend that's that way. He gets up to give announcements or whatever. He never looks at you. Never looks at a person in the audience. And I've seen pastor after pastor after pastor after pastor in my life do that. I don't know why it is. I don't know if they teach it or if it's just naturally the way they're comfortable. I don't know what it is. But I'm saying, look at people. Talk to people, not at them, not at the walls. Talk to people. Number 2, in writing to an audience of any size, including fund appeal letters, let me give you an assignment. When you go home, if you write appeal letters, or if you get appeal letters, do it either way, take a red, yellow, and green marker and go through it, and everything that's I, me, mine, circle it in red. Everything that's we, us, and you, meaning, or we and us, meaning both of us, circle it in yellow, which is partly self-centered and partly you-centered. Anytime the word you is used, circle it in green and see what the letter looks like from there. I've had appeal letters come to me where I've done that I actually sat down with clients and I'd show them, I said, let me see your last appeal letter. Let me show you how this works out in appeal letters. One of them had 53 reds and 1 green. You know what the green was? We would sure appreciate your financial support. right? Here's our minister, here's what we're doing worldwide, and we'd sure appreciate your financial support. I say, try it on your appeal letter. See how you're coming across to people. See how people that are appealing to you are coming across to you. Is it all about you, or do you see? Basically, people will give you token gifts because you ask for them if they like you and trust you. They won't give you large gifts unless you are doing what they want to do but can't do it without you. So unless the writer knows what you want to do, how can they appeal to you, really, other than token gifts? So what you're trying to figure out is, what you're trying to figure out with large donors, or donors in general, is what do they want to see done in the world? Do they want to see children fed? Do they want to see people educated? What do they want to see people evangelized? What do they want to see happen that they can't get done? They can't do it. They don't know how to do it. They're not in a slum where they can do it. Or it's like they cannot do it. They want to see it done. They have a burden of compassion to see it done, but they can't do it. But you come along and show them what you are doing, and that is in alignment with what they would want to do. Here's you. And what you're doing is in clear alignment with what they would want to do if they could. They'll give you money. If they trust you, they'll give you money. But if you come along and try to tell them, here's what we're doing, and therefore you should give to us, it's off here, they may give you a token. They're not going to give you any real money. And particularly if it's like, it's like, what we're doing is this way, and what they want to see done is that way, they give you $10, they won't give you 10,000 or 100,000. I don't care how much they like you, they won't give you a lot of money unless what you're doing is what they want to see done. They won't. But in the appeal letter, you can see how self-absorbed they are and how insensitive they are as to what your agenda is. And what you're doing when you're writing an appeal letter is you're trying to communicate the fact that you know what they want done. Have you ever wanted to feed? How would you like someone to respond to your mother if she were in this situation? Is this something you would like to do? But there's simply no way to do it. Well, we are doing it in 73 locations and blah, blah, blah. What you're trying to figure out is, what do they want to see done that they can't do without you? And they see you as a conduit to do it, they'll give you money to do it. Critiquing another's communication style, again, red, yellow, green. And then relating one-to-one with a friend. Communicating is not just telling your latest on the topic. When you're communicating with people, it isn't just waiting for them to stop so that you can tell what you're doing on the subject. It is actually asking them questions and listening to their answers, and asking them more questions to listen to more answers. If you would red, yellow, and green your own conversations, think back on your own conversations with friends, relatives, etc. How many eyes are in there? Well, I went to you never believe I had. How many eyes are in there compared to what did you experience? What are you experiencing? What are you feeling? What do you, it's like, is your natural conversation very I-centered, or is it very other-centered? By the way, a lot of couples deal with the question of intimacy and intimate conversation, etc. Let me show you what intimate conversation is, because a lot of people, a lot of wives especially, have said to me over the last 35 years, we don't have any intimacy in our marriage. And the husband says, what do you mean? We have sex 3 times a week or 3 times a day or whatever. But he doesn't understand what she's really saying. And let me show you what intimacy really is. If this is a person, not a loaf of bread, a keyhole, or a mushroom, this is a head and a body. If this is you, we all have three selves. We have a public self that everyone sees. We have a private self that only you have seen in private, the only friends see in private. And we have a personal self that only we have ever seen. This is what Scripture refers to as your heart. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Not how does he look to the public, not even how does he look to the friends, but as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Now, when you've got another person you're communicating with, they also have a public, a private, and a personal self. And they also have this private self, they have a heart. As that person is in their heart, so are they. Now, we all know what sexual intimacy is, and like that, where a part of a person goes in another part of a person. But for emotional intimacy, what it is that this person says, all right, I will let you past what the public sees, and past even what other friends have seen, and tell you things that I've never told anyone else. Let me share my heart with you. I will tell you things that no one has ever heard before about me, about what I think, what I feel, what I'm experiencing. And if the other person says, you've bared your heart, but all I get is a steel wall over here to see what the public sees, that's where a wife says, we have no intimacy because I will let him into my heart, but he won't let me into his heart. But when the wife shares this or the husband shares this, and as a result, the other companion lets pass the private self, or the public self, the private self, and into that person's heart, that's a heart-to-heart conversation. That's an intimate conversation. Just sort of for what it's worth on the subject of communicating. And then listening to hearts. The ability to basically keep asking questions. One of the things I've come to see is that every person has 100,000 words they would like to spill out. There's pressure areas. There's something they would like to share if they had a relationship of trust and the person would ask the right questions. If there's a relationship of trust and you ask a person the right questions, 100,000 words come out. What you're doing is listening to their heart on a subject. Do you listen to hearts or do you listen to experiences? You're listening to what experience did you have at the raceway, or are listening to how do you feel about this? How do you personally think or feel, or what do you experience in this area? What in your heart is what you're really trying to get at, frankly?